Day 7 of the August 99 10-day retreat in Springwater. Before I start out, let me say something that I forgot to say in the beginning. I do mention in talks what somebody said because it is a lead to looking, questioning, but I do not remember verbatim what somebody has said. I sort of remember the essence. So please don't feel misunderstood or misquoted. Also, as it happens in every retreat, it's never just one person, or rarely just one person bringing up this point. It seems to run in waves, which is not surprising. We are one consciousness. With individual variations. So before the 2 days break, somebody said something like this: "Your talks are all right." At times I laugh, but really, I would like to hear something other than this focus, this constant focus on our psychological problems. You read poetry on the last day, why not all the way through, here or there? This is what I can relate to much better. This thing of mentioning, focusing on psychological problems brought back memory of my early talks at the Zen Center, where I was sort of labeled a psychologizer rather than being a real, genuine Zen person. The fact is, we are brimful and exploding with psychological problems all the time, most of the time. And retreat is a time where these can come into a new awareness, into new light. Somebody said to me when, in listening to a talk, it is as though the brain was lit up and one can see the connections, the movements, very clearly, which is not usually the case as we move along our habitual paths in daily life, our habitual reactions. Much less clarity, much less awareness and insight than if there is a gathering of like-minded people bringing some energy to this listening and looking. And this whole question of what are we? And an underlying desire to know oneself deeper, other than what one has known oneself to be or thinks that one is. To get off of the thinking and imaging about oneself into observing images. What they do, their power, their contraction, etc. Also, in listening to a talk, no matter what the topic may be, and the topic comes out of contact with the people who participate in this retreat, who expose themselves to me or to each other in groups. And this exposure of the human confusion or problem works in this organism and comes out as a talk to try to clarify confusion, anger, fear, etc. But it doesn't just come out of knowing, remembering. It comes out of looking anew, afresh, this moment, as what has been said surfaces as a memory, what somebody has brought up. We talked about that the other day. It does not just mean dealing with memory. It means looking at what happened afresh, or what is happening at us from moment to moment. Out of what? Out of what? Can one look out of emptiness? Some clarity, presence, which is not totally self-centered, so that there's space to discover. And we can together participate in this discovering space, in this listening space, and looking space, regardless of what the topic may be. I know there are other spiritual centers or traditions where there's a lot of talk, and I can't repeat it because it's not right now in my repertoire, about wholeness and sacredness and oneness and the ultimate and the absolute versus the relative. But you cannot look at the absolute. You cannot look at wholeness. You cannot really talk about it. All you can do is be that. And maybe talk and relate out of that. So in this spirit, we'll start with a poem. Just one. And this is called Roses Late Summer by Mary Oliver. Roses Late Summer. What happens to the leaves after they turn red and golden and fall away? What happens to the singing birds when they can't sing any longer? What happens to their quick wings? Do you think there is any personal heaven for us? For any of us? Do you think anyone on the other side of that darkness will call to us? Meaning us? Beyond the trees, the foxes keep teaching their children to live in the valley. So they never seem to vanish. They're always there in the blossom of light that stands up every morning in the dark sky. And over one more set of hills along the sea, the last roses have opened their factories of sweetness and are giving it back to the world. If I had another life, I would want to spend it all in some unstinting happiness. I would be a fox or a tree full of waving branches. I wouldn't mind being a rose in a field full of roses. Fear has not yet occurred to them, nor ambition. reason they have not yet thought of. Neither do they ask how long they must be roses, and then what? Or any other foolish question. So in that spirit, we'll ask some foolish questions. This is just in quotation mark. There's no judgment here. Someone posted some questions to me. At different times, I have heard you suggest remaining aloof or detached when meditating. Meditating as if too sick to care. This is a quote, a mutation of a quote by Huang Po. Meditate like a man too sick to bother, he says. And at other times, encouraging people to track it down, investigate, go into whatever is there. Not just see it, but understand it. I also heard you speak in a July talk about developing the ability to hold a thought or image in the mind so you can look at it. Though I know you do not mean aloof in an oblivious way, it does seem at odds with a more active holding and tracking down approach. Could you say something more about how these relate to each other and to open awareness? And also, is there a difference between stillness, where the mind becomes quieter, or even wholly silent for times, and openness, which seems to involve some weakening or even absence of the sense of I? My experience is that even in what seems total stillness for me, the sense of I is still strong. Where do you go from there? Nowhere. You stay here. You stay here. We'll stay here together with these questions. I don't quite remember the context in which I talked about tracking it down, but I think it was in connection with this all-pervasive sense of self. Me. I, mine. Not said pejoratively. We're looking factually, not judgmentally. And if one is really interested to step out of all theorizing about the I, often people say, don't we have to develop an I before we can drop an I, and things like that. That it's our human nature, or it's a good thing to have it, I'm happy with my I. It's all right. But here, for the next few minutes, can one step out of the theoretical I and watch it. Watch it, observe it, track it down, I may have said. I get upset, or I feel upset, which means the body is in turmoil, feels uncomfortable, has some pressure to it, to run or to do something or to hide. Why? What's going on? I don't mean psychoanalytically, but asking the question and then quietly looking and listening what will unfold out of a question that is asked into not knowing, but wondering. It's amazing how questions which are asked in this wise, why am I so upset? And not just going with our old-fangled explanations. because of my past, because what they did, but going deeper with it. The surface answers, all right, let them come. And realize that's not the whole thing. There's something deeper and deeper and deeper. Answers come, and yes, okay, that's all right, but that's not the whole thing. One can feel it. And maybe not knowing what this whole thing is and wandering into not knowing. No more answers are coming. That's one way of tracking down. Another way is as we go, as we get irritated, annoyed, upset, angry at someone, desirous of someone, wanting, fearful or anxious, to watch it, to watch what is going on in this body-mind, to observe it, at first with an observer seemingly firmly in place. I am observing myself, and this I is the wanting it to be different, the judging it, the comparing it. That's this I observer. And keep watching, keep observing, sort of undauntedly by all that is discovered about oneself, which one has maybe never assumed. I remember years ago someone coming to the house. I don't know why a person came to the house, but they did. Asking me all kinds of questions, quite theoretical about this I, the sense of I. And I said, for a week, just watch yourself carefully. How you react, how you act, how you ache, and whatever all goes on. And we'll have another meeting in a week. And when she came back in a week, she said, I have discovered that there is not one thing I do which is not self-centered. Not one thing. And she didn't say it depressed or dismayed or discouraged, but she was discovering things about herself which she'd never assumed. Because awareness or mindfulness throws light in a new way, not from knowledge, not from explanation, but from the immediacy of observing, which makes a lot of our images crumble. Images about ourselves, positive, negative, you name it. We're not images, we're life in action or in reaction most of the time. Reaction is unconscious or hardly conscious, automatic. But if there's the interest to observe oneself, then there's some awareness dawning, or let us rather call it mindfulness or attention at this moment. Because there's still a lot of judgment in there, a lot of feeling I shouldn't be this way and I'm so worthless. So bad. We talked at length in one meeting how hard it is to let go of these negative images of oneself and only keeping account of when one really lives up to them, leaving out all the other times where one may respond quite selflessly because there's an openness to see someone else and responding to that situation freely. So this is what is meant by tracking down in one's daily life or in sitting. Stuff that comes up. Where did it come from? One's motives. That's a treasury hunt. All the motives, because we have all kinds of ideas why we do things, overlaying deeper motives. And to be careful not to ascribe or attribute motives which one hasn't discovered, because we have all kinds of positive and negative ideas about why we do things, but to become scientific in the observation. And not rest with something that comes up and just wonder, is that really the true motive? And leaving it alone. It will show itself if there's this openness, this acceptance of whatever comes up. It's just like when we're with our children. If we're open to listen to them, they will tell us all manner of things. If they anticipate judgment, they will not talk. Keep it to themselves and maybe not even look at it themselves, because the adult's images are imprinted in the child of how they should be and may last a whole lifetime. So not to cling to imagery, but watch it and wonder and begin to see the whole picture in a day, in a moment. Not assume. I said this example of a woman who said everything I was doing was selfish. Not to draw any conclusions from this. I don't know whether she observed everything. Not to conclude about it. Conclude means closing the book, knowing now how I am. During the past 2 days of being home, we watched a bit of news and saw scenes of this incredible earthquake that has shaken a whole area of Turkey, east of Istanbul. An enormous casualty. There's still 35,000 people are missing and thousands of people killed. And yet, and from all over the world, salvage teams, rescue teams, going through the rubble, and yesterday pulling out a child that had been buried for 3 days, not giving up this tremendous urge to find life and bring it to light and save it. It's unimaginable what this takes in the energy to just be there and find and help. I don't think that at a time like this there is much room for image mongering. It showed that part of the rescue effort has been called out now, bulldozing, and then they showed other places where people are still digging and looking, listening. So, we are not what we think we are, even in our personality reactions and actions. All kinds of responses can come up which are not guided by selfishness, which are evoked by the total situation to which one responds presently with an energy one had not imagined one possessed, and one doesn't possess it. It emerges when there is this openness to be part of the whole. Listen to it and let it evoke what needs to be done. So, how does this relate, the person says, to either this quote-unquote aloofness, and the other is to holding a thought. Let's take the holding first. Right now, in talking about this earthquake, the imagery that was brought over television, and what it evokes here, the words that come up, this comes out of holding this thought, holding this. We use thought very generously, this moment in consciousness, to look at it. And I've mentioned at other times, this is what koan study is all about, to hold sometimes very complex koans in the mind and look at them in depth or from a depth till they resolve or show themselves, reveal themselves. You wouldn't say to your Zen teacher, wait a minute, that's looking into the past, because this thing was written in the year 1000 or so. There's one beautiful response, just pops up right now. A Zen teacher is asked something by someone, and he says, quote, I remember Honan in the springtime, the partridge sings among the scented flowers. When I first read that, I thought he's remembering something. No, this is not memory, although memory is active in a human being's mind when it is actively holding something. So, we talk about anger. Anger and fear crop up the most because they're the greatest hindrance and burden to human beings like you and me. And to hold doesn't mean I perpetuate anger, but the remembrance of it or the remembrance of fear can come up very clearly, not perfectly, and what other people have said, how one has responded time and time again. To hold all this in the mind and speak out of looking at it. And so we look at it together and maybe learn something about these incredible hindrances human beings are burdened with, which shade the light, cloud the sky. So what about the remaining aloof from it all? And I don't recall in what connection that was said, but it doesn't matter. Look at it now. One has gone over and over in one's whole lifetime over anxiety and fear. One has understood it deeply, has had deep insight into it, how it inevitably, unalterably goes with a sense of me, of self, of I, because that sense is an illusion, living in an illusion that separates us from wholeness, from presence. One has watched it, one has philosophized about it and talked about it and understood it. And for whatever reason a thought arises, or it doesn't have to be a mental thought, the whole body remembers. It's chock full of memories, which can be triggered physically may not need a talk, and may not need a thought. Could be some kind of association, who knows? It's all watchable. One can discover a lot about why suddenly the body throbs with anxiety or fear or whatever. So one has gone through it ad infinitum, understands it. No need to go into it again. We're talking right now of meditation. It arises, let it arise, let it do its thing. Remaining aloof, meaning remaining aware. Aware of self-center, but not of self-center. Letting it be. It's not a big deal. And watchful, intelligently watchful, that the mind which wants to spin a story out of everything remains aloof. That's not control, that's wisdom. Not to keep spinning this old thread again into some tapestry about what I am or what I should be or what's going to happen to me. Just be what? Nothing, open. And here we come to this difference between openness and stillness. It's a very good question. A lot of people ask it. A lot of people don't ask it because they don't want to question their stillness. One is attached to it, maybe addicted to it. And there are subtle machinations, if I may call it such, you may find a better word, subtle machinations to keep that stillness intact. The body-mind has learned how to produce it. There's some control mechanisms at work, maybe. You find out yourself. And now it's got it, and it's holding on to it. And doesn't want to be disturbed with questions about whether there is a holder or a controller. What the motives may be. This stillness overlaying inner turmoil or dis-ease. The person asking it, notice there is a difference between a stillness in which there is still someone present. And the motives I mentioned may not be there. It's for each one of us to discover. Can one question in stillness, or does the whole thing crumble already? That's true stillness, if questions can be asked and it doesn't go away. So, in asking, is there a motive to not face something else and listening into this stillness and nothing there, nothing coming up, nothing stirring? One may ask, am I repressing or bracing against something and listening again? Listening to the body. Is the body relaxed and open, unencumbered? Like we talked about these little children who's, if you shake their arm, their hands just wobble up and down. They're not held. And yet there is some sense of meanness in there. There's a whole school, Nisargadatta, his book is called, it's called I Am That, but his practice is to first come to this I am, hold this I am. The sense of I am. I exist. which is sort of, as he puts it in his teaching, the last thought or the first thought. Thought, again, used generously. I may not think I am, but here it is. I exist. And then here and there, he talks about letting go of that I am. Well, who's going to let go of it? At times, to one's amazement, it's just not there. It's not an inevitable natural ingredient of our being. I'm sure it has something to do with reflection, with habit. But there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing to be deleted or eradicated, because that's the I working on itself. And again, strengthening itself, making itself a new existence. I have to get rid of the I am. Not to remain aloof of the whole problem. What's there is there. What is it? Not know it. Not really know what one is. One isn't the I am. What is one? To let that question sit there, if it will. What am I beyond all the imagery, all the storylines, all this moment-to-moment observation of reactiveness and pain and pleasure? Is that all there is to me? As a fundamental question which grips a lot of people, but not everyone. It doesn't have to grip anyone. At times the truth about oneself reveals itself. One knows not why or how. One hasn't done a thing. Yes, openness, the way we can use the word right now, and words are very flexible, nothing absolute to them. Openness, right now we say, means no self-center, just what is. The crickets right in the ear, but the ear is just a word. They're right here. Breathing, the energy, is it inside the body? Is it outside? It's a meaningless question when there's presence. That's right here, isn't it? This beep, beep, beep. Or does thought put it out there? That's thought creating outside and inside. Listen. Again, the breathing, the beeping and the siren, everything is coming to help us. In this whole universe of sounds and touches and sights, and awareness beholding it all without a center. said, awareness beholding it all, don't make a picture out of it. A concept. There's a nice little booklet by Vimala Thakur, and the title is Beyond Awareness. Because the mind can play with everything. So what is beyond awareness now? And it wants to know. Just means drop it all. No concepts. Nothing. Just what's there. Without giving any importance to it. It's not important. Are we meeting? We will end here for today.